Hello, and welcome back to the One Decision Away podcast. I'm your host, Elijah Mang, and I'm excited to get into this one. So, what we're going to be talking about today is changing your story to change your life and let go of unnecessary underlying tension or stress, anxiety that you might be holding on to when really you don't need to hold on to it anymore. Now, this is from a little discovery I had. I was doing some reading and journaling in a cafe that Maggie and I were um, staying right by in a very small town at our last Airbnb in Italy. And it was so simple, and it's something that I have acknowledged and even talked about before. Um, but it really just hit me, and I internalized the importance of it. And that is changing your story, changing the story that you're telling yourself about your life, about yourself, about your past. And this actually, when I was reviewing um, the last episode, the first episode that I made of this podcast, I noticed it come up in that as well, like talking about my past and my story in a certain way where I am describing it from a place of limitation, or and obviously to get the point across sometimes you have to. And so that's what I feel like I was doing in the last episode, is I was still trying to make a point around what led me to experience a lot of the stuff that I've experienced in my life, a lot of the challenges, so that I can share, what I've experienced, what I've gone through, and what all of this inner work has helped me to overcome. So it's very real, but it gets to a certain point where in your journey, in your path, you got to look at that and realize like you can't continue on telling yourself the same story that you've been telling yourself. And the main premise of this episode is basically that there are infinite possibilities. Now, we all may have experienced our past, our childhood growing up, um, in a particular way that is leaning towards one side or the other of the spectrum, right? You may have been very well off financially. Um, and specifically, I'm going to be talking about money in this because that was the breakthrough that I had personally. But you may have grown up being very well off financially, like that's all taken care of, not an issue, or like dirt poor, and struggles all the time and a lot of stress around money and things like that. Now, for me, as I described in the last episode, it was we weren't dirt poor, like we got everything taken care of, but there was a lot of stress around it and challenge and struggle around it. And so there are infinite possibilities because it's like both sides of the spectrum were present in my childhood growing up. Like there was the positive end, and then there was also the struggle and the stress. And I'm not going to say I didn't experience that, but what's the point in continuing to live my life holding on to that idea of how I grew up, or telling other people when I share my story um, about, oh, I grew up and money was really tough, because I'm continuing to identify with that in a way. And so the main premise, the question of this episode that I want to focus on is if there are, we'll say, infinite possibilities as to what we can create, just possibilities that exist in the universe. And you may have, like I was saying, you may have experienced one side or the other of the spectrum of possibilities, but there are infinite possibilities that exist. And just because you experience one side of the spectrum growing up, for example, doesn't mean that you have to experience that side of the spectrum for the rest of your life. You're you can change that. Like you're totally malleable. You can reprogram your mind. You can reprogram the way that you look at and experience life and yourself and reality. Because here's one core underlying truth of this episode that you need to understand. And that is that you do not experience reality as it is. None of us know what that actually looks and feels like. You experience your thoughts about reality and the way that reality is. You experience it through the filter of your thoughts and feelings, your perceptions. And so often that filter is created from those past experiences. So it's time to unpack that, unpack that, release the stuff that's not serving you, and become aware of the beliefs, of that story that you keep telling yourself, of limitation, of lack, of not being good enough, of struggle, and let go of it. Become aware of it so that you can then change it. If you're not aware, you don't have any power. If you go on telling that story over and over again, and you're not even aware of it, like, you don't have power to change it yet. So becoming aware of those processes. And the main question that I focus on with this topic, or that I like to focus on, is like, why are we so drawn towards one side or the other? And like, why do we feel pulled? Like, for me, why do I feel pulled to continue telling this story of lack, of limitation? And with the idea in mind that you only experience your thoughts about reality and about your life, then it opens up a whole new perspective on it. It opens up a whole new reality that you get to pick and choose from. Because while you may have lived that way up to this point, becoming aware of it, you can choose to set your focus in a different direction, to decide, oh, I don't want to focus on that lack and limitation anymore. I want to focus on abundance because I have learned enough to understand that the world, life is abundant. And so for me, like, what kept me pulled towards identifying with this story of limitation? And I break it down into two main things. First of all, your story. And if you can hear I don't know, it's pretty loud. It's an ambulance outside. Your story. So the story that you keep telling yourself. And while it may have been a real experience that you went through, the odds are that you're not focusing on the whole picture. You're not seeing the whole picture. You're only seeing you're only seeing half of the whole truth. Because the way I really internalized this when I was journaling in that cafe was like, okay, what's keeping me drawn towards these thoughts of scarcity? And it's that I keep going with the programs that were instilled in me from my childhood. I keep telling myself that story, and I also keep feeling the feelings. And so secondly is the emotional charge that you have toward whatever story you're telling yourself. So you have the story, which is more of the mental thought process, and then you have the emotional charge. Like, what kind of emotions are you holding on to that keep you thinking and feeling in association with limitation, with that story? And so often we're holding on to fear. We're holding on to shame or guilt. Like, maybe we grew up thinking and being told that money was bad. And just this not enoughness. We're holding on to like this feeling of lack. Like, we lack something, like everything that isn't enough, because there's still this stress factor around money. And even if you've made a lot of money, even if you are totally financially secure, and you still find yourself coming back to these thoughts of fear of, oh, what if I lose it all? Or, sometimes anxiety keeping you up at night as you think about when the day will come that you lose it all and go back to ground zero, go back to nothing, go back to being broke. right? And it's like that old story is sticking with you. So out of this world and universe of infinite possibilities, why do we continue to focus on that? And those are the two things that we need to unpack: the story and the emotional charge. And so, first of all, like I've been saying multiple times, just becoming aware of what that looks and feels like, of how that story is played out for you, how you keep telling it. And for me, I'm, it's what I have personal experience with. So I'm going to refer back to my story. And it's like I would tell myself that there's not enough, that honestly, it's more of an emotional charge. Um, I would tell myself the old story, but so often the negative thoughts that come up are coming from some kind of emotion that we're still holding within us. Like if you're experiencing a lot of thoughts around insecurity or I'm not good enough, it's most often usually stemming from some kind of feelings and emotions that you're holding within your body, that energetic charge. And it's creating all of those thoughts, bringing them all to the surface. And often it can be an avoidance of actually feeling the emotion that you're feeling. And so you're not allowing yourself to feel what you're actually feeling. And so you're identifying with all of these thoughts at the logical level, the mind level. And it's interesting how we sabotage in that way, hold ourselves back in that way. But um, like these feeling just discomfort around money sometimes, or feeling like, oh, I don't have enough. I want this, but I don't have enough, or things like that. And it has been a pretty common theme in my life, and definitely contributed to me not making as much money as I could be making. Um, just living still with an energy of limitation. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to notice, see the stories that you're telling yourself from your past. And whether it's been a constant theme throughout your life, or you started out broke and you built your way to being financially secure or even wealthy, and you still experience those feelings of anxiety or stress or fear, then that's very clear that it may not be so much a story, or it could be of, you're going to lose it, when you're going to go back to, or just having the fear of going back to being broke. But it's very likely that you're just holding on to emotions, fear mainly, that needs to be released. It needs to be let go of so that you can fully step into, embody, and identify with what is real in this moment in your reality. And there's two sides of the coin. Like looking back into my past, yes, there was struggle, but also like we got so many things. Like we had so many things. There were so many times where um, it was like there was stress and fear around whether or not something was going to work out, but it did. And it always did. Like it got me here, and everything has worked out well enough to get me here. And so why have I been drawn towards and focused on this end of the spectrum when I could be here? Because that's the reality, and that's been the reality all along. I just continue to get bogged down in a state of fear. And it's the same for so many others. You know, probably you too if you're listening to this. At least in some way. Now I'm mainly using the topic of money, but this could be for anything else. This could be for relationships. This could be for um like you feel like no matter what you do, you fail and you're a failure, or you've gotten to a point where you don't even try very much to do new things or do the things that you deep down want to do because you're afraid that you'll fail. So this applies for so many different things. But the question here is, what is that story actually standing on? Like, can you find proof that the opposite is true? because there's very likely proof that the opposite is true. And so that's what I was finding when I realized, okay, why I've been so focused on this, I've been continuing to identify with this, when like an even more powerful um, and proven truth is that this life is abundant. There's more than enough to go around, and things always work out. Like there's so much proof for that being true. And so stack the proof up and watch the old stories and beliefs fall away, because when you become aware that you've been telling yourself this same story, living in those same limitations, but you realize that there's even more proof that the opposite is true, then that stuff will just fall away. You know, it's like it's standing on a shaky foundation. It'll just fall away because it's not true. And also by feeling and releasing, right? There's two aspects to it, the story and the emotions. Feeling and releasing the emotions of fear, realizing you are actually, well, no. Here's the thing, is you have to become safe and secure internally. You have to find your place of safety and security internally. Otherwise, regardless of how much you have, and you may experience this, regardless of how much money you have, regardless of how well off you are, regardless of how much everything is just taken care of, you will still feel insecure because you don't have an internal foundation of security. And so this is so, so important. And beyond that, like what this is so funny. This is one of the biggest things that causes us to continue to fall into these illusions of our limitations and continue to tell these limited stories to and about ourselves and to everybody else who will listen, is what thoughts feel the most real to you, because those are the ones that you're going to take the most seriously and identify with. But this is the shift that needs to happen. The thoughts that feel real to you are based on the story and the emotions. But as I said in the beginning of this podcast, you do not experience reality as it actually is. You experience through a filter of your thoughts and your perceptions. The only feelings that you ever feel are the feelings of your thoughts. And so if those thoughts feel really real to you, then you found the core that is still holding you, holding you with those limitations. That doesn't even make sense. Whatever. It's still holding you back and causing you to live within those limitations. And that is that you're not realizing you're creating those feelings and experiences. You're only experiencing your own thoughts. You're not experiencing reality as it actually is. And so if you feel like there's a lot of stress and pressure, it's stress and pressure that's being created internally based on perceptions of the external world and seeing the external world as the one and ultimate truth. But there are infinite possibilities of things that can exist, of perspectives that we can look at, and of truths that we can identify with in this moment. And so when you can really identify that you're getting caught up on thoughts that feel real, and there may be some external evidence to prove it, but that's not what you're experiencing. You're experiencing the thoughts. Then you can decide to change your thoughts and experience something else emotionally. And that is going to change the game, because that'll change the energy that you live in every single day, how you feel every single day, and also what you attract and create in your life. Because if you're still living with these emotions and beliefs of lack, of scarcity and everything, then that's what you're going to continue to attract. And whether you believe in the whole law of attraction or not, or just that you create your reality, either way, that's what you're going to create because that's who you're being energetically, or that's what you're going to attract, right? I believe that both are true. We create and attract things into our reality. So whoever you're being at the core is the determinant of what that looks like for you. And so I want to wrap it up with that. Keep this one simple. And it's kind of a complex topic, but a lot to digest. And I hope that you really take this into consideration and look at your own life. Like, even journal on this, write about it. What are those stories that you keep telling yourself? What are the associated emotions? And go into that story. Go into the story of your past. Like, what? Realize that you're looking at a part of the whole and find proof for the beliefs that are the opposite of that limitation: lack, fear, scarcity. All right. I hope you enjoyed this one, and stay tuned for the next. Leave a rating and review, and go follow me on Instagram at _Elijah Mang. I appreciate you. Peace.